day my mom called me and asked for help, her voice shook in a way I'd never heard before. It wasn't just the usual weariness from long days or small worries she tried to shield us from. No, this was something deeper, heavier, a weight that pressed through the phone and into my chest. "I didn't want to tell you," she said, her voice cracking slightly, "but the doctor says I need some urgent tests and treatments. It's expensive." I froze, my stomach twisting. Mom had always been the strong one, the woman who worked 2 jobs after Dad left, who made birthday cakes out of boxed mixes and love, and who never once complained about the sacrifices she made for us. Hearing her admit she needed help felt almost unnatural, like seeing a crack in the foundation of a house you thought was indestructible. "How much do you need?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. My mind was already racing, calculating what little I had in savings and wondering if I could pick up extra shifts at work. "It's a few thousand," she said hesitantly. "I know it's a lot, and I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious." Her hesitation only made me more determined. "Don't worry, Mom," I said quickly. "I'll figure it out. You've always been there for me. This is nothing compared to what you've done." Her soft sigh of relief tugged at my heart. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll pay you back when I can." "No, don't even think about it," I replied, meaning every word. That night, I barely slept. My head swirled with worry about her health and the logistics of coming up with the money. By the next morning, I'd decided to dip into the small emergency fund I'd been saving for years. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I also reached out to a few close friends who lent me some money, no questions asked. In just a few days, I managed to pull together the amount Mom needed, and I sent it to her without a second thought. When I told her the money was on its way, she cried. "You don't know what this means to me," she said through sniffles. "I can finally breathe again." Her gratitude made every sleepless night and every sacrificed dollar feel worth it. For weeks after, I checked in with her constantly, asking about doctor's appointments and treatments. She was vague, but always reassured me. "I'm doing better now," she'd say, her tone light, almost cheerful. I took that as a good sign and pushed away any lingering doubts. After all, why would she lie? This was Mom, the one person in the world I trusted completely. But then small things started to nag at me. It began with a casual comment from a coworker who had bumped into her. "Your mom mentioned going on a trip," they said. "Lucky her. I wish I could afford a vacation." I blinked, confused. "She's not traveling. She's dealing with some health issues right now," I said, my voice tinged with defensiveness. The coworker raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. Still, the seed of doubt was planted. Over the next week, more inconsistencies began to surface. An unfamiliar charge on her bank statement that I accidentally saw, a passing remark from my cousin about how relaxed Mom seemed lately. My heart started to race every time something didn't add up, but I told myself there had to be an explanation. There had to be. Then one evening, scrolling through social media, I saw it. A photo of Mom on a sandy beach, sunglasses perched on her nose, holding a cocktail with a bright umbrella. The caption read, "Finally taking some me time." My stomach dropped. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, disbelief washing over me. The woman who had cried on the phone about medical bills, who had sworn she needed my help to survive, was sipping drinks on vacation? I felt anger rise, hot and uncontrollable, but underneath it all was something worse, a deep, aching sense of betrayal. The image of my mom on that beach burned into my mind, an unsettling mix of confusion and anger swirling inside me. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the post. How could she? The same woman who had begged me for money, voice trembling with desperation, was now posing on a pristine beach as though nothing in the world could trouble her. I stared at the picture until my vision blurred, my chest tightening with each passing second. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone had invited her as a gift, or maybe it was an old photo she'd decided to post now. But those weak justifications didn't hold up under the weight of what I was seeing. My mom didn't take vacations. She barely even spent money on herself. For as long as I could remember, she'd worked tirelessly, claiming she couldn't afford even the smallest luxuries. Yet here she was, indulging in the very thing she'd always dismissed as frivolous. Unable to let it go, I decided to call her. I tried to steady my voice as the phone rang, but my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. She picked up on the third ring, her tone as cheerful as ever. "Hey, sweetheart," she said brightly. "How are you?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure how to begin. My mouth felt dry, and I had to remind myself to breathe. "I saw something today," I finally said, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. "Oh?" Her voice remained light, but there was a slight pause, almost imperceptible. "What did you see?" I swallowed hard. "Your post on Facebook, the one where you're at the beach." Silence. It wasn't long, but it stretched between us like a chasm. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, almost hesitant. "Oh, that. Yes, that," I said, the frustration I'd been holding back starting to leak into my voice. "Mom, what's going on? You told me you needed money for medical bills. You said it was urgent. So what am I looking at here?" There was another pause, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then she sighed, a deep, weary sound that only made me angrier. "It's not what you think," she said softly. "Then explain it to me," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you lied to me." Her voice wavered, the cheerfulness completely gone now. "I wasn't lying about needing help," she said. I needed to get away for a little while. I've been so stressed, and I didn't know how else to handle it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Stressed? Are you serious, Mom? Do you have any idea what I went through to get you that money? I drained my savings. I borrowed from friends. You told me you were sick. You made it sound like it was life or death." "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. After everything I've been through, I thought I deserved a little time to myself. And yes, maybe I didn't handle it the right way, but it's not like I do this all the time." Her words felt like a slap in the face. "Not all the time? Mom, this isn't about how often you do it. It's about the fact that you lied to me. You manipulated me into giving you money I didn't even have, and for what? A vacation?" "I didn't mean for it to get this far," she said weakly. "I thought maybe you'd understand." I let out a bitter laugh, unable to contain my frustration any longer. "Understand? You're asking me to understand how you lied to me and used me?" "Sure, Mom, that makes perfect sense." The conversation ended abruptly, neither of us saying goodbye. As I stared at my phone, my anger gave way to a deep, hollow ache. I had always thought of my mom as someone I could trust completely. Now, that trust felt shattered, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. The days after that phone call were a blur of emotions. Anger, disbelief, and sadness swirling together in an endless cycle. I couldn't concentrate on anything. My mind kept replaying her words, searching for some clue that might make it all make sense. But no matter how many times I tried to rationalize it, the facts remained. My mom had lied to me. She had used me. I didn't talk to her again for nearly a week. I couldn't. every time I thought about her, the image of her sipping a cocktail on that beach flashed in my head, mocking me. I was too hurt to face her, too confused to decide what to do. But the situation was too big to ignore forever, and I knew I couldn't carry it alone. So, I did what I thought was the next best thing. I confided in my cousin, Lisa. Lisa had always been the voice of reason in our family, someone who managed to stay neutral even during the most heated arguments. When I called her, I unloaded everything. The phone call with my mom, the money, the photo, all of it. She listened quietly, only interrupting to ask a few clarifying questions. When I was done, she sighed. "That's a lot," she said. "I mean, I don't blame you for being upset. I'd be furious too." "Furious doesn't even begin to cover it," I replied, my voice shaking. "I feel so stupid, Lisa. How could I not see it? She played me, and I fell for it." "It's not your fault," Lisa said firmly. "You trusted her. You had no reason not to. But honestly, I don't think this is just about money." Her words stopped me in my tracks. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it sounds like there's more going on with her than she's letting on. I'm not saying what she did was okay, it wasn't. But maybe there's a reason she felt like she had to lie. Have you thought about that?" I hadn't. The betrayal had been so overwhelming that I hadn't stopped to consider why she might have done it. But Lisa's suggestion planted a seed of doubt in my mind. What if there was more to the story? What if my mom was dealing with something she hadn't told me about? "I don't know, Lisa," I said after a long pause. "Maybe you're right, but it still doesn't excuse what she did. She took advantage of me." "You're right," Lisa agreed. "It doesn't excuse it. But if you want answers, you're going to have to talk to her. Really talk to her." I knew Lisa was right, but the thought of confronting my mom again filled me with dread. Still, I couldn't let this fester forever. So when I heard that the entire family was planning to get together for a Sunday dinner at my aunt's house, I decided that would be the time. If she wanted to dodge my questions, she wouldn't be able to with everyone else around. Maybe the pressure of being confronted in front of the family would force her to tell the truth. The day of the dinner arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. My hands were clammy, my stomach churned, and I couldn't stop rehearsing what I was going to say. When I arrived at my aunt's house, the warm smell of roasted chicken and baked potatoes greeted me, but it did little to calm my nerves. My mom was already there, laughing and chatting with my cousins as if nothing had happened. Seeing her so carefree only made my anger bubble up again. I tried to act normal as I greeted everyone, but I could feel my mom's eyes on me, studying me. She must have known something was coming, but she didn't say anything. It wasn't until after dinner, when everyone was sitting around the table sharing stories, that I decided to make my move. I cleared my throat, my heart pounding in my chest. "I need to say something," I began, my voice louder than I intended. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. My mom stiffened in her seat, her smile fading. "I found out something recently," I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. "Something that's been bothering me a lot. And I think it's time we talk about it. Here, in front of everyone." My mom's face paled, and for a moment, I almost felt guilty. But then I remembered everything I'd sacrificed for her, and my resolve hardened. This was her mess to explain, and I wasn't going to let her dodge it anymore. The silence around the table was suffocating. Forks paused midair, conversations dropped like a stone into still water, and every set of eyes was fixed on me. My mom's expression shifted quickly, first confusion, then fear, and finally a guarded calm, like she was bracing herself for a storm. I wasn't sure if she was preparing to deny everything or to come clean, but I was past caring. "You remember when you told me you needed money for medical bills?" I began, my voice trembling slightly. "You said it was urgent, that you didn't know what else to do. So I gave you everything I had, and I didn't question it, because you're my mom, and I trusted you." Her face twitched at the word trusted. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "No, let me finish," I said firmly, because then I saw this. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen, opening the photo of her on the beach. I turned it toward her, holding it up for everyone at the table to see. A collective murmur rippled through the room. My cousins exchanged uneasy glances. My aunt frowned deeply, and my grandmother, sitting quietly at the head of the table, let out a sharp gasp. My mom's face turned ashen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Care to explain this, Mom?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "Because I can't figure out how urgent medical bills turned into you sipping cocktails on a beach." She let out a shaky breath, her hands clutching the edge of the table. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice low, almost pleading. I didn't mean for it to happen this way." "Then explain it," I said, my anger flaring. "Explain how you could lie to me, take my savings, let me borrow money from my friends, just so you could treat yourself to a vacation." The tension in the room was unbearable. My aunt shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Lisa, who sat beside me, reached out to squeeze my hand under the table. My mom's eyes darted around the room, as if looking for an ally, but no one came to her defense. Finally, she slumped back in her chair, her shoulders sagging with defeat. I needed a break," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know how it sounds, but I was drowning. I've been holding everything together for so long, working nonstop, paying the bills, trying to keep this family afloat. And it got to be too much. I felt like I was going to lose my mind." Her words hung in the air, but they didn't soften the anger in my chest. "So your solution was to lie to me?" I snapped. "To take money from your own child under false pretenses?" She winced, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't know what else to do," she said. "I thought if I told you the truth, you'd say no. You'd tell me I couldn't afford it, and you'd be right. But I needed to get away, even for a little while. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I didn't." The room was eerily quiet, everyone waiting to see how I'd respond. I felt a pang of guilt seeing her so defeated, but it wasn't enough to erase the betrayal. "You didn't mean to hurt me," I repeated bitterly. "But you did. You didn't even give me a choice, Mom. You manipulated me, and now you expect me to just understand?" She looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "I know I messed up. I was selfish. I didn't know what else to do." Her apology might have softened me if it hadn't been for everything I'd gone through to help her. The nights I'd spent worrying, the friendships I'd strained by borrowing money, the sacrifices I'd made, all for a lie. I leaned back in my chair, my anger simmering just below the surface. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this," I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. "You didn't just take my money, Mom. You broke my trust, and I don't know if that's something we can fix." The words seemed to break her. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. My family sat frozen, unsure whether to comfort her or side with me. For the first time in my life, I felt completely alienated. From her, from them, from the person I thought I was before all of this happened. The room stayed silent, heavy with unspoken words, as I stood up from the table and walked away, leaving my mother and the broken pieces of our relationship behind. I left the dinner that night, feeling as if the weight of the entire world was pressing on my chest. The cold evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, but it didn't do much to cool the storm brewing inside me. I got in my car and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, unsure if I wanted to scream, cry, or just drive away and never look back. As much as I tried to convince myself I'd done the right thing by confronting her, a gnawing sense of guilt kept creeping in. I replayed the look on her face, how small she'd seemed when she realized there was no way out of her lie. Part of me felt vindicated. She deserved to face the consequences of her actions. But another part of me, a softer, quieter voice in the back of my mind, whispered, "You've hurt her too." The days that followed were a blur of strained silence and awkward phone calls from other family members. My aunt called first, trying to mediate. "I know what your mom did was wrong," she said carefully, "but she's your mother. She made a mistake, yes, but you have to remember everything she's done for you." Her words stung. Was I supposed to just brush this off because of everything my mom had done for me in the past? Did that excuse her lying to me, betraying my trust? I didn't know how to respond, so I simply said, "I need time, Aunt Linda. That's all I can say right now." She sighed, clearly disappointed, and hung up. The calls kept coming. My cousins, some sympathetic and others critical, each had their own opinions about the confrontation. Lisa was the only one who fully supported me. "You didn't do anything wrong," she reassured me during one of our late-night calls. "She lied to you, and you had every right to call her out. Don't let anyone guilt you into thinking otherwise." But guilt was hard to shake. Despite Lisa's support, I started questioning myself more and more. Maybe I should have handled it privately. Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up in front of the entire family. Maybe I'd gone too far. Then, out of the blue, my estranged brother Ryan called me. We hadn't spoken in years. He'd distanced himself from the family long ago, tired of the drama and tension that always seemed to follow us. Hearing his voice on the other end of the line felt surreal. "So," he said after an awkward pause, "I heard about what happened." "Of course you did," I replied dryly. "Everyone seems to have an opinion." He chuckled softly, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Well, I'm not calling to lecture you. I get it, you know. Mom's always been good at making you feel like you owe her something." His words caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked. Ryan sighed. "When I left, a big part of it was because of her. She always had a way of making me feel guilty, like I wasn't doing enough. She'd play the martyr, talk about all the sacrifices she made for us, and before I knew it, I'd be bending over backward to make her happy. It got to be too much. So I left." I sat in stunned silence, Ryan's words hitting me like a ton of bricks. He was voicing feelings I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. "So what do I do?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't tell you that," Ryan said. "But what I can tell you is this. You're allowed to feel hurt. You're allowed to set boundaries. Just don't let this consume you. It's not worth losing yourself over." His advice stayed with me long after we hung up. For the first time in days, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about the money or even the lie. It was about the complicated, messy relationship I had with my mom. And maybe, just maybe, confronting her was the first step toward understanding it. I wasn't ready to forgive her, but I realized I needed to face my own feelings head-on. Avoiding her wasn't going to solve anything. If I wanted answers, If I wanted closure, I would have to speak to her again, this time away from the judging eyes of the family. It was time to finally have the honest conversation we'd both been avoiding for far too long. A few days later, I found myself sitting in my car outside my mom's house, my heart pounding as I tried to summon the courage to go inside. It had taken every ounce of resolve to come here, to face her again after everything. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, an apology, an explanation, or maybe just some kind of closure. But I knew I couldn't leave things the way they were. Ryan's words had echoed in my mind every day since our conversation. You're allowed to feel hurt. You're allowed to set boundaries. Just don't let this consume you. I stepped out of the car, the cool breeze brushing against my skin, and walked up to the door. Before I could second-guess myself, I knocked. It felt like an eternity before she opened it. When she did, the sight of her caught me off guard. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her eyes, usually bright and full of energy, were tired and rimmed with red. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, silently inviting me in. We sat in the living room, an awkward distance between us. The silence was deafening, neither of us knowing where to start. Finally, I broke it. I didn't come here to fight, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need to understand. She nodded, her hands wringing together in her lap. I know, she said quietly, and you deserve that. There was another pause before she took a deep breath and began to speak. I've been lying to myself for a long time, she said, her voice trembling, pretending that I'm fine, that I can handle everything on my own. But the truth is, I'm not fine. I've been drowning for years, and I didn't know how to ask for help. Taking that vacation, it wasn't about escaping from you or anyone else. It was about escaping from myself. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on my own anger, my own sense of betrayal, that I hadn't stopped to think about what might have driven her to do what she did. Still, it didn't erase the hurt. But why lie to me? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Why make it about medical bills? Do you know what I went through trying to get that money for you? The sacrifices I made? Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked down at her hands. I thought if I told you the truth, you wouldn't help me. You'd tell me I was being selfish, that I didn't deserve it, and maybe you'd be right. That's not fair, I said, my voice breaking. You didn't even give me a chance to decide. You took that choice away from me. I know, she whispered, and I hate myself for it. You're right. I shouldn't have lied to you. I shouldn't have put you in that position. But I was so desperate, so lost, that I didn't know what else to do. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of her confession hanging heavy in the air. I wanted to stay angry, to cling to the righteousness of my hurt, but hearing her admit her flaws so openly made it hard to hold on to that anger. She wasn't just my mom anymore. She was a person, a flawed, struggling, and deeply human person. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said finally, my voice soft but firm. At least not right now, but I'm willing to try, because I don't want to lose you. I need time. Her shoulders sagged with relief, and she gave a small, tearful nod. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, she said. I promise. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not for immediate reconciliation, but for the possibility of rebuilding. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but at least now we were on the same page. As I left her house that evening, I felt a strange sense of calm, like I'd taken the first step toward healing, not just for her, but for myself too. The days that followed my conversation with Mom felt lighter, but they were far from easy. I didn't wake up magically feeling better or less hurt, but there was something about confronting the truth, acknowledging her flaws and my own pain, that started to loosen the knot of anger in my chest. Still, the road ahead felt uncertain, and I wasn't sure how to rebuild something that had been so deeply fractured. Mom, to her credit, seemed determined to make amends. She began calling me more often, not with excuses or apologies, but just to talk, to share little details about her day, as if trying to mend the bridge piece by piece. At first, I kept my responses short, still wary of trusting her fully again. But as the days turned into weeks, I found myself opening up, bit by bit. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. Then, unexpectedly, the family began weighing in. My aunt invited me over for coffee one afternoon, and I knew as soon as I walked through the door that this wasn't just a casual chat. Her face was lined with worry, and she wasted no time cutting to the heart of the matter. "I know you and your mom are trying to work things out," she began, stirring her cup absent-mindedly. "But it's caused a bit of a divide in the family." I sighed, already anticipating where this was going. "What kind of divide?" She hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "Some of us feel like you were too harsh, bringing it up in front of everyone the way you did. Others think you were right to confront her. It stirred up a lot of old feelings about how things have always been with your mom." I stared at her, confused. "What do you mean by that?" Aunt Linda leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "Your mom has always been complicated. She's always done so much for the family, but sometimes she does it in a way that leaves people feeling like they owe her something. And when she doesn't feel appreciated, well, she can act out." It was unsettling to hear someone else articulate what I'd been wrestling with for weeks, maybe even years. "So this isn't just about me," I said slowly. "It's a pattern." Linda nodded. "It doesn't make what she did okay, but maybe it helps to understand why she did it. She's always felt like she has to be the strong one, the one holding everyone together. And sometimes that pressure gets to her." Her words stayed with me as I drove home, swirling in my mind like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving. Mom's actions weren't just a one-off betrayal. They were part of a larger pattern, shaped by years of stress, sacrifice, and her own unresolved struggles. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it gave me a context I hadn't fully considered before. That evening, I decided to call her. She picked up on the second ring, her voice hesitant but hopeful. "Hi, sweetheart." "Hi, Mom," I said, leaning back on the couch. "I've been thinking about everything, and I need to ask you something." "Anything," she said quickly, her tone eager. "Why didn't you tell me how you were feeling? Before all of this, I mean. Why didn't you ever say you needed a break, that you were struggling?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Because I didn't want you to see me as weak. I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle it." "Mom, you're not weak," I said, my own voice softening. "You've been strong for so long, but that doesn't mean you can't ask for help. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Her sobs on the other end of the line caught me off guard. "I've always been so scared of letting you down," she admitted through her tears. "And now I feel like I've failed you in the worst possible way." Her words cut deep, but they also brought clarity. "You didn't fail me, Mom," I said gently. "You hurt me, yes, but you're still my mom, and I want to fix this, not just for me, but for us." It was a conversation I hadn't realized I needed, a chance to strip away the anger and get to the heart of what had gone wrong. We talked for hours that night, not just about the incident, but about everything, the sacrifices she'd made, the pressure she'd felt, and the mistakes we'd both made along the way. By the time we hung up, I didn't feel like everything was magically resolved. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward. Not perfectly, not quickly, but together. And for now, that was enough. In the weeks that followed, Mom and I began rebuilding our relationship. One conversation, one gesture at a time. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I'd catch myself slipping back into anger or distrust, but I'd remind myself of our long talk and her tearful admissions. She'd been carrying so much for so long, and while that didn't excuse her actions, it gave me a reason to try, to meet her halfway. She surprised me one day with a small envelope in the mail. Inside was a handwritten letter, something I hadn't seen from her since I was a kid. The sight of her neat, looping handwriting immediately brought a lump to my throat. Dear, my name. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about trust and choices, and how I took yours away. You were right. I can't undo what I did, but I want to start making things right, even if it takes the rest of my life. I've been speaking with a counselor, trying to unpack everything I've been holding inside. It's scary, but it's helping me see things more clearly. Most of all, it's helping me realize how much I've hurt you and how much I need to change if I want to earn back your trust. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. I hope one day you can look at me and see the mom you've always deserved. I'm working on becoming her, one step at a time. Love, Mom. I read the letter twice, tears slipping down my cheeks before tucking it into my nightstand. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. For the first time, she was acknowledging not just her mistakes, but the work it would take to rebuild what we'd lost. Encouraged by her effort, I decided to take a step of my own. I called the friends I'd borrowed money from to explain everything and begin paying them back. To my surprise, most of them were understanding, some even laughing it off as a crazy family story. But one conversation with my best friend Sarah stood out. I'm glad you're working things out with her, Sarah said, but don't forget about yourself in all of this. You've been through a lot too, and it's okay to take time to heal. Her words stayed with me. I'd been so focused on repairing my relationship with Mom that I hadn't thought much about how the experience had affected me. So I took a page out of her book and started therapy myself. Talking to someone about the layers of resentment, guilt, and love I felt was like peeling back the layers of an onion. Painful, but necessary. Meanwhile, the family was still adjusting to the fallout. Some had taken my side completely, others tried to play neutral, and a few subtly hinted that I'd gone too far. One day, during a family barbecue, my grandmother pulled me aside. You know, I've been thinking about what happened, she said, her voice low and serious. Your mom made a mistake, a big one. But you're not wrong to hold her accountable. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions to grow. And from what I can see, she's trying. That's all you can ask for. Her words gave me a sense of peace I hadn't realized I needed. Growth wasn't linear, and neither was healing. But if my mom was willing to put in the effort, so was I. The turning point came a few months later when Mom invited me to lunch. It was nothing fancy, just a small cafe we used to visit when I was younger, but the gesture felt significant. Over sandwiches and coffee, we talked, not about the past, but about the present and the future. She shared stories about her counseling sessions, how she was learning to let go of the martyr complex she'd carried for so long. I shared updates on work and my own therapy, surprising even myself with how open I was being. As we were finishing, she reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said softly, "for standing up to me, for holding me accountable. I don't think I ever told you, but you're one of the strongest people I know." Her words caught me off guard, and for a moment I couldn't speak. "Thanks, Mom," I said finally. "I'm proud of you too, for trying, for changing. It means a lot." It wasn't a perfect ending, because real life rarely offers those, but it was a beginning, a chance to rebuild, to learn, to grow. And as I walked out of that cafe, feeling lighter than I had in months, I realized that was more than enough.